Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Lake Erie Regional Grape Programs Weekly Podcast. I'm Jennifer Phillips Russo, and I'm here with Kevin Martin. Kevin's going to give us a little more information about a fact sheet that's out there now for New York State paid sick leave.
Yes, we are. This is going to pertain to New York growers and also anybody who does business in New York with employees. So if you are a grower that crosses state lines to harvest grapes for somebody else, or you happen to have acreage in New York State, this will all apply to you when you are in New York State. Or I guess a better way of describing that is when your employees are in New York State. So even if you're based in PA, as soon as you cross that state line, this starts to apply. So this technically is for everybody, although we do have a lot of PA growers that probably rarely or never cross state lines. So feel free to ignore this and just maybe make a mental note of it in case it becomes a federal law someday. It might be modeled after this type of system.
And this is just based on, when did it start? Did it start in August?
So there's a couple dates. It was actually coincidentally written into law before COVID-19, although it seems like maybe COVID-19 would have inspired this. It was written before that. It was written as part of the New York State budget, and then it was passed after COVID-19 had just started when the budget passed in April. So it was passed in April, and then all employees who work in New York State began accruing time on September 30th. So one day in September and all of October and our 19 days so far in November.
And Kevin, it's everybody, right? It's not just full-time?
It's everybody except for family. But if you have somebody that works 1 hour for you and that's it, it would include them. There's no waiting period. There's no threshold for seasonal. This is going to affect a lot of businesses that are not agriculture because the sick leave requirements are more broad than traditional sick leave requirements of some private sector employers. It does not include the public sector. Not that that is relevant to our growers, but it includes not-for-profits, it includes the private sector, it includes agriculture. So just about everybody.
So I have a question in regards to, what if you only have somebody who works 3 hours? How much sick time do they get for working just 3 hours? And do you have to honor that? Like, I don't want to make it sound like that.
Right.
Like 20 minutes?
Yeah. So you get 1 hour of sick time for every 30 hours you work.
Oh, okay.
There is no guaranteed payout. So technically speaking, if somebody works 3 hours and then quits, they would not be eligible for sick time because they wouldn't have a day to use it, assuming they worked all 3 hours in the same day. So they actually have to still be working for you to use that sick time. There's no payout at the end of their employment.
Oh, got it. And how do you keep track of that on your, just like on a spreadsheet, and where do you?
Well, that's up to you. But the law does require that contemporaneous records are maintained. The employee is accruing 1 hour for every 30 hours, like I said. That maxes out at 40 hours per year if you're a small employer, less than 50 people, or less than 100 people. Once you hit 100 people, you need to provide 56 hours rather than the 40. Okay. This is all paid unless you have less than 4 employees.
Wow, there's so many. So if you're smaller than 4.
If you're smaller than 4, it's not paid, but
you just still have to honor it.
They still have not completely explained what an employee is in terms of counting. So a lot of employers are looking for that 4 to be the equivalent of 4 full-time employees. It looks like they're going to count bodies. So if you have one person who works for you full-time and 3 people who work for you 3 hours a year, that's 4 people. So you actually need to get to 5 to pay it. So if you have 5 total people and one of them is full-time and the other 4 work an hour a year, that's 5 people you have to provide paid sick time. And yes, if you're under 5 somehow, although I can't imagine very many growers are unless they're basically at 0. If you're under 5, then it's not paid.
My brain is just going back to what you just said before that. Well, so the definition of an employee. So what if one of those people gets sick and it's not one of, if you're like combining people to make one employee, who gets the sick time?
No, so that's just the threshold to decide what size employer you are. So
Okay.
if you have on the books 5 people that you paid in a calendar year, that's probably going to make you, we'll call it a mid-size employer. So that means that you have to provide paid sick time as soon as you hit 5. It's possible that the final regulations will allow for a different method of counting, but these accruals started September 30th, and employees have to be eligible to use this time January 1st. So at this point, I'm not sure we will know anything else before those accruals are allowed to start. So if we know nothing else other than what we know right now today, January 1st, you'll have to pay sick time if you have 1 full-time employee and 3 seasonal pruning people that work, more than an hour.
I just want to pull something up here. I'm going to share my screen. So let's say I'm just curious as to getting in some of this information. Oh, you don't want to see all my emails. All somebody has to do is go to newyork.gov, right? Oh, if they are in in New York State or have employees that cross over. Oh, I'm not signing up.
So yeah, so to try to get a handle on some of the, if you have a specific question, you can obviously contact us. But Department of Labor has a frequently asked question and some details on their website. It's a New York State Department of Labor site that we can send out.
Okay, we'll send it out.
It's a fairly long link to get directly to that page.
I was going to put it up because I saw it and I was hoping there would be an easier way to just search it and pull it.
I mean, I can put it up so you can see what it looks like, but it's a fairly long link to get to it.
But even if you have other questions, just shoot Kevin an email.
Yeah.
And he'll send the link to you. Which, Kevin,
Yeah.
I think we should talk about this. I think we should talk about how we're going to be able to get in touch with you moving forward.
Let's get through this first.
Let's get to
the other thing I really wanted to mention is a couple of the things that are unique to paid sick leave that you might not think of as intuitive. And the reason I think they're not intuitive is because if you or your spouse, work for a private sector employee, you have an idea of what you think sick time is because there are standard practices in the private sector that vary a little bit from employer to employer, but not a lot. And this law has certain requirements that may not be the same as those standard practices. So you might not be getting into what you expect. The first issue I see is with the name of the law, New York State paid sick leave. So the issue with that is the permitted uses for sick leave also include safety. So there's sick leave, which is very broad. Going to the doctor for preventative care for your child is included in sick leave. That's included in some private sector plans, but it's certainly not an industry-wide standard. So the sick leave is broad. The documentation that you're allowed to request is very narrow. It might be more narrow than what employers are used to getting. They have not finalized what the privacy rights of the employee are. So for the time being, there's not going to be a lot you can ask. It looks like the only thing you'll be allowed to ask is if they actually went and, you could request some written documentation that they went, but certainly you're not going to be able to get a diagnosis. There's also safe leave. So an employee
safe leave, SAFE.
Employee safe, yes. So the employee can use this time if they have a family member that's been a victim of domestic violence or some other offenses that are similar to domestic violences or stalking or human trafficking. There's a whole list of defenses of offenses that they could have been or a family member could have been a victim of. And if that happens, all of these activities that they might need to do to keep themselves safe associated with those offenses are eligible for leave. I just bring it to your attention, not because I think you're going to, farmers are going to pay a whole bunch of sick time, safe time related to this, but because if it does come up, you are required to, and it's not going to come up very often. So 4 years from now, when somebody mentions that, an employee mentions that this issue has come up and they need to, not come to work the next day, you need to be aware that not only do you have to let them do their thing, but you also have to pay them under the sick time policy, which is, you're going to forget because it's not intuitive unless you really commit it to memory at this point, because you're noticing something strange. One of the other big things is the amount of sick leave is also very strange. So even though you're accruing 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, that means any full-time employee is going to max that out before the end of the year. So then they can stop accruing for that year. You don't have to let them take more than 40 hours or 56 hours if you're a large employee per year. They're capped at that 40. However, for whatever reason, there is no cap on how much they can accrue. So if they work for you for 20 years and they accrue 1,000 hours and they never use it, they just accrue it all. And there is no point that you can reset that or take any of that sick time away.
So it all rolls over from year to year.
100% of it rolls over from year to year, but they can't do anything with it because they can still only use the 40 hours per year. So
what happens when they're done? Like when somebody retires, do they just goes away?
Whether it's a layoff or a termination or a retirement, it just goes away. There's no payout. So I have no idea why you're allowed to accumulate unlimited amounts of sick time. But the reassuring thing is, if you come across that and you're concerned, they can accumulate unlimited, but they're limited significantly in terms of how much they can use. I don't know why. That's not intuitive. It's not how the private sector would ever work, but that is how this works. So you do need to be aware of that.
Okay. Is there anything else that they need to actually, not actually, but be aware of? Collective bargaining agreements, alternative accrual system, like I'm looking at this fact sheet.
Yeah, I mean, there's some flexibility in this policy if you're dealing with a union, but I'm assuming you're not. If you are, I would obviously contact an attorney because this is something that's going to have to be written into the next collective bargaining agreement. And it doesn't have to look exactly the way the law permits if you have a collective bargaining agreement. But until you have a new one, this is how it will look for a collective bargaining unit. I mean, I guess that might be interesting to most of our growers, but it's certainly not going to be practical. I don't know of any grower that has a union. The only other thing I would say is family members are exempt. They're exempt, I believe, both from the counting and from the eligibility of the sick time. If you have multiple sites, those sites all have to be counted together as you count up your sick time. They can definitely use this for a doctor appointment. They can use it for the dentist. They can use it for the eye doctor.
Well, I think that's good. And I'm looking, just so you're aware out there, the growers that we're talking to, there is an FAQ or a frequently asked question sheet on that. And I'm actually looking at it myself. Excuse me. So Kevin can definitely send that to you if you would like. And I'm sure you could also do a Google search. But
Yes. The only other thing I would mention is we have really good information about what they need to be paid. They need to be paid their
regular rate.
Their regular rate, which is confusing if they work piece rate, which a lot of pruning crews do. So you need to calculate their regular rate to pay them. So what that means is you need to keep track of their hours, which you need to do anyway. You've always needed to do that for a whole host of reasons, but now you need to do it because you need to know how many sick days to give them. You don't know that unless you know how many hours they work. Once you know how many hours they work, you know their average rate of pay. That is what you have to pay them when they take sick time. The only other thing I would say is that has to be an average. So it's very common to pay them two different rates of pay. Like if they go into renewal work or they're doing something hourly, they often get paid a lower rate. you need to pay the average of that. The only thing I would suggest to you is you should move your pruning crews to an hourly rate of pay and then pay them a bonus based on their speed. That would effectively allow them to get paid in a similar manner where they are being paid a bonus for working faster, just like that's essentially the incentive that's associated with piece rate. But as long as that bonus is not guaranteed, and as long as it is not part of their regular rate, then you don't have to pay sick time based on that. And I would recommend that because we're also up against overtime rules as well. And you're going to be tracking overtime and paying overtime if they don't take a day of rest. You might pay overtime as the days get longer for working 60 hours a week. Right now, I think they're pretty much limited to 9-hour days, maybe 9.5 if they're sitting, waiting in the car for the light to poke out of the sky. Maybe they hit 9.5 hours a day. But even 9.5 hours a day times 6 days is not really a concern when it comes to overtime. So what you want to watch for overtime is if they're taking a day of rest or not. And then once the days get longer, if they are working more than 60 hours as well. So again, you have to keep track of their hours. You want to lower their regular rate of pay as much as you can while still reimbursing them in a similar total, in a similar way so that you're not actually cutting their pay. You're just not making it part of their regular rate of pay because at least right now, they don't expect overtime. They don't expect sick time. That includes, for the most part, a lot of full-time farm employees and migrant workers. So as long as it's not expected, I don't view it as something you're taking away that's going to create an issue with your employees. As society gets used to these new laws 5 years down the road, that may change, but we do what we can do right now. I think for sick time, that really is the highlight of it. There are a couple of unanswered questions like, what happens if a pruner calls in on a Sunday, which is a day of rest, but they regularly work their day of rest, or harvest crew calls in on a Monday, do you pay them for 8 hours or 12 or 20 when you don't have a regular work day and you just work until the work is done? And those questions are not answered yet. So we don't have answers for that. Hopefully those issues don't come up as often until, pruners obviously haven't accrued very much sick time yet, and harvesting won't be until October. So hopefully we have some time to figure that out, but right now we really don't have a great answer.
Okay. Thank you for all of that information. And like I said, Kevin can send you this PDF if you just send him an email. He'll get that out to you.
Yeah, we'll put a link down in the comments as well.
Okay, great. Well, that's all we have for sick time. I feel as if we should talk about it a little bit and then maybe do a separate podcast to just explain what's going on so that it's actually important, put front and center.
Well, Jen's
I don't want it to just have to get all the way through the end of this to then find out. So I feel like we need to do another podcast right after this.
Jen's going to do another podcast because I'm taking off.
This is true. You're taking off for a while. You want to share that information and for how long?
So my wife, Heather, is expecting another child. So we will have another child next week, and I'm going to take off and do some childcare in January, and also be part-time for a decent amount of time in the foreseeable future. To be completely honest, some of these new laws that you've had to, work through with payroll, I'm taking advantage of some of them, and a lot has changed since the birth of our first child in New York State. So I'm out of here.
He's out of here.
But I am going to, balance work and life, and being home full time sounds just as as stressful as being at work full time. So I'm going to be working a couple days a week in December, and just has to do with what Penn State requires. I won't be here in January, and then I'll be back in February, but I won't be quite full time. So just so you guys know, I probably won't answer the phone very much in January, but outside of January, I'll certainly be around to answer your questions.
So just to be clear, you are going on leave, and we should all respect that. If they have pressing questions, they should send you an email and you'll get back to it when you are in for that week.
I struggle more with hearing the phone ring than I do avoiding the temptation to answer it. So I think I'll be okay. But yeah, just be understanding that if I ignore your call, it's because there's a screaming baby. I do have the self-control to do that. So if you want to call, feel free, but just, I hope you don't get frustrated.
It's for an amazing reason that you're actually tending to a new family member. So
Absolutely.
I'm excited for you and your family. And I probably will be plastering pictures here and there.
If you can get them.
Oh, I can get them. I know your wife. So thank you for joining us, everybody. If you have any questions about the paid sick leave for New York State, please feel free to reach out and send an email or put a quick comment below. Also, if you have any ideas or information that you're looking for, please reach out. Send us an email, put a comment below that you would like to find more information about such and such, and we'll find it for you.
Oh, I do have one more thing. Please don't ignore, I mean, you can ignore this podcast, but don't ignore the law.
No.
They did, in this frequently asked questions, they did do a good job of defining the penalties. So for every hour of sick leave or every dollar of sick leave you don't pay, you're going to pay the government $2 and you're going to pay the employee $2. So it'll cost you. There's a 7-year statute of limitations on that, and attorney fees are eligible. So what you'll see in even medium-sized employers is attorneys will be recruiting clients to, so if you have one employee making a complaint and they go to an attorney, that attorney will recruit your other employees to file charges as well, because that's how they would enhance their attorney fees. So just be careful about it and just don't ignore it. And it's the law. So you're just going to have to pay it just like you do regular wages and FICA. It's no
the law.
Okay. I will be back in December to do a podcast or two. So you haven't lost me completely. But thank you for joining us this week, and I hope you found this helpful.
Congratulations, Kevin, on your upcoming new family member. And everybody out there, have a great Thanksgiving. We are not going to be meeting next week with a podcast, so we'll see you after that.
Thank you.